r/AskMeAnything. I'm a reporter who investigated a Florida psychiatric hospital that earns millions by trapping patients against their will. Ask me anything. I'm Neil Beatty, an investigative reporter at the Tampa Bay Times. You might remember me from this 2017 AMA. I spent the last several months looking into a psychiatric hospital that forcibly holds patients for days longer than allowed while running up their medical bills. I found that North Tampa Behavioral Health uses loopholes in Florida's mental health law to trap people at the worst moments of their lives. To piece together the methods the hospital used to hold people, I interviewed 15 patients, analyzed thousands of hospital admission records, and read hundreds of police reports, state inspections, court records and financial filings. Read more about them in the story. In recent years, the hospital has been one of the most profitable psychiatric hospitals in Florida. It's also stood out for its shaky safety record. The hospital told us it had 75 serious incidents, assaults, injuries, runaway patients in the 70 months it has been open. Patients have been brutally attacked or allowed to attempt suicide inside its walls. It has also been cited by the state more often than almost any other psychiatric facility. Last year, it hired its 5th CEO in 5 years. Brian B.J. Coleman was a quarterback on the Green Bay Packers practice squad in 2012 and 2013, played indoor in Canadian football, was vice president of sales for a trucking company, and consulted on employee benefits. He has no experience in healthcare. Now he runs the 126-bed hospital. We also found that the hospital is part of a large chain of behavioral health facilities called Acadia Healthcare, which has had problems across the country. Our reporting on North Tampa Behavioral and Acadia is continuing. If you know anything, email me at nbedi@tampabay.com. Link to the story. Proof edit. Getting a bunch of messages about Acadia. Wanted to add that if you'd like to share information about this, but prefer not using email, there are other ways to reach us here. Edit 2. Thanks so much for your questions and feedback. I have to sign off, but there's a chance I may still look at questions from my phone tonight and tomorrow. Please keep reading. How did you first find out about this facility? Do you think anything will be done regarding the facility as a result of your reporting? This all started with a tip from a family. A woman called and said her 80-year-old mother was trapped inside. She was struggling to see her or even speak to a doctor. She said, during one of the few allowed visiting hours, she met other families with almost identical experiences. I started calling around and heard the same thing again and again. It's too soon to tell what will happen, but I'll be reporting and keeping an eye out. Thank you so much for doing this. Is any legal action being taken to stop this and hold the hospital accountable? This sounds like a dystopian novel come to life. Some of these patients would occasionally hire lawyers to help get them out. The presence of a lawyer sometimes made things smoother, but not always. I haven't seen any larger legal action take place. I work in healthcare and see the Baker Act misapplied pretty routinely. Sometimes even to just prevent a patient from leaving AMA when they pose no threat to themselves or others. Do you think it's time to revisit and reform the Baker Act? I've thought about this before, but I don't think there is any political will for changing the law. It affects so few people, and there is all this paranoia around preventing mass shootings. I'm not sure, TBH. Experts say the law itself is pretty strict about ensuring patients are guaranteed certain rights and aren't exploited. But there is a trend of facilities following incorrect interpretations of the law. There was an editorial in our paper from our editorial board responding to this. www.tampabay.com. Do you have any recommendations for people to stay safe based on anything you have learned? For example, if a person felt wary of something like this going on near them, but still needed mental health help, are they just screwed? No, they should definitely seek help. We did identify problems here, but the system as a whole is important, and people who need mental health help should seek it. I think a little bit of research ahead of time could help. The online reviews from this facility had already echoed some of the issues we found. Also, there are generally public records about state inspections online. You can look up most healthcare facilities in Florida here. floridahealthfinder.gov. I remember this being the plot to one of the seasons of American Horror Story. Basically, a reporter checks herself in to go deep undercover and then finds herself being held there against her will, with the idea that only a mentally ill person would claim that she's healthy and finding ways of making her normal actions seem crazy. If you were admitted into their system, how could you be sure that you can walk back out again if you were to go deep undercover? It's also the plot of Unsane, directed by Steven Soderbergh, starring Claire Foy and Joshua Leonard from the Blair Witch Project. It's not a new idea because it's not a new problem. And I think the answer is, there is no way to make sure you can walk back out again. Do you suspect this kind of thing is widespread in the industry? Or is this an aberration? It's definitely widespread. BuzzFeed News won a Pulitzer for that article, BTW. There was a Kazualama here a few months back with a nurse from a mental health hospital. I asked her about it and she said it's maddeningly common. TIL BuzzFeed won a frickin' Pulitzer. Are most mental patients being held against their will? In this facility, yes. Most of the patients are brought in under the state's mental health law, the Baker Act. Roughly 2/3 of the total patients are brought in involuntarily. If one found themselves trapped against their will, what is the best advice you have for them? This is a good question and a difficult question. The law does allow hospitals to hold people who may harm themselves or others. But it also outlines many rights for those patients. I think my best advice is for patients to know their rights and know the state organizations you can contact if you feel like those rights are being violated. Hey do you have any advice for me? Reading your story was shocking. This happened to me in Texas just a year ago. It ruined my entire university graduation and destroyed my mental health. There's nothing that provoked anxiety and hopelessness more than being forced to stay in a mental facility against your will for days while you effectively fail your classes by absence. How prevalent are these places across the US, and what rights do we have? I've been unable to pay these bills, which to me seem more like ransom money. Can I sue? How successful are people who challenge their experiences in court? My story. I was beginning my final semester of senior year at Texas A&M, never once had a panic attack, was a great student in biochemistry, and I must have been pretty ignorant about mental health. I was up late several nights studying when I went to a party in my apartment complex. Suddenly I had my first ever panic attack and was paranoid that I got poisoned. I called the ambulance and, in my lack of sleep, freaked out state, told them I might have taken too many pills. At the time, I realized I was being paranoid, so I wanted them to think it was an accident. Clearly I was just not thinking straight. It was a traumatic moment in my usually boring life that took a random turn. My first panic attack, I had truly no idea what those were before. Next thing I know, I'm sleepy, in the hospital, and the sheriff is telling me to sign some forms. I'm a student, I think it's an insurance thing. I sign. Finally they bring a car around with 2 police officers and take me to a psych hospital. I'm told I can't leave. I'm trapped in there for nearly a week. I fail my classes for that semester, and the screaming people in the building just make it worse. I'm treated like a crazy person. I'm in shock, crying, now I look insane. I start to think I've gone mad. Every day I wake up, I'm told I can't leave since I'm a threat to myself and others. I can't use my cell phone, I can't go anywhere but my room and the cafeteria by escort. They tell me I would have to stay longer if I don't participate in group therapy. Everyone on staff looks at me like a nut job and convinces me I'm mad. After a week, I'm let out. My family doesn't look at me the same way, and I have no classes to go back to. It's taken over a year to recover from this. For those who don't understand why this affected me so bad, I don't blame you. I never took mental health complaints seriously before this. This can happen to anyone. And it can happen randomly. And to be treated this way is a life-altering trauma. I still have moments where I wonder if I've gone insane. Sparked by simple things like being tired at the end of the day or forgetting my keys. It's worse when I think about it, worrying that if I have another moment of stress, that cops will take me away and send me to an institution. Being institutionalized against your will, losing your college graduation, having family told you're mental, and spending a week confined to a wing with actual insane men screaming at you. This can ruin years of your life. I eventually graduated a year later, did well on GREs, and put my life back on track. But what should have been a simple case of first panic attack turned into a year of hopelessness and paranoia. All because there's an entire industry designed to capitalize on people's trauma and incentivized to make it worse. There should be a book published with accounts like this. It's profit-driven evil. There is a movie called Unsane that I watched. It's quite similar to this and others' responses. It got me very anxious, and the only way I convinced myself was by thinking that this was a very good plot. I didn't think it happened in real life. Like, comment, and share. Reddit Story Topper. Subscribe now.